Hello and welcome to ThinkStep's webinar on global e-waste compliance obligations. My name is Lisa Dean and I'm a global regulatory consultant at ThinkStep. During this presentation, I will give you a brief introduction to ThinkStep, provide case studies of e-waste legislation in force in selected countries within 3 global regions, and explain how ThinkStep services can help you achieve global WEEE batteries and packaging compliance. We will look at the new WEEE regulations in India, which came into force on the 1st of October this year, with a registration deadline of the 31st of December 2016. I will then walk you through how ThinkStep can ensure you meet WEEE compliance obligations within this new deadline in India. At the end of the presentation, a link will be provided for you to submit any questions you may have. To introduce you to our company, ThinkStep is a global sustainability software company. More than 2,000 companies in 20 different industry sectors rely on ThinkStep's sustainability software solutions, including 40% of the global Fortune 500, such as Hewlett-Packard, Interface, Siemens, Unilever, and Volkswagen. For example, ThinkStep provides leading life cycle assessment software, Garby, which has 20,000 users in more than 20 different industry sectors. ThinkStep has extensive experience in WEEE, batteries, packaging, RoHS and REACH regulations. For example, in 2003, we wrote the UK government guidelines on RoHS and WEEE directives to explain practical compliance requirements to UK companies. In 2007, we were the first organisation to gain authorisation to operate a UK government-approved WEEE compliance scheme. We launched our global services in 2013 following requests from many clients. We have carried out these services for a number of clients in several global countries to date. At the end of this presentation, I will introduce you to how ThinkStep can fully manage your producer registration, reporting and collection obligations where required, and explain how our quarterly regulatory updates ensure you remain aware of where you are obligated as a producer of WEEE, batteries and packaging across the world. To give you an idea of markets where you need to consider global WEEE regulations, this map shows countries in which WEEE regulations are in place or draft WEEE regulations are currently being considered. This slide shows countries in which batteries regulations are in place or draft batteries regulations are currently being considered. And finally, this slide shows countries in which packaging regulations are in place or draft packaging regulations are currently being considered. The number of global regulations relating to product compliance is increasing annually. As I will highlight in this presentation, the requirements and regulations in each country differ greatly, and companies usually lack the internal resources to understand and manage different compliance requirements for WEEE batteries and packaging in each country where products are sold. The WEEE batteries and packaging regulations in each country are continuing to change as new requirements are implemented. There are often language barriers to overcome, and in some instances there are sub-ordinances to understand, particularly in Asian regulations. Today we'll be focusing on the differences in e-waste legislation in 3 different global regions: Latin America, Africa, and Asia Pacific. I will provide case studies of e-waste law in selected countries in these regions and highlight variances in product scope and registration requirements. In Africa, we will look at the national environmental regulations in Nigeria and the management of waste electrical and electronic equipment in Cameroon. The joint ordinance in Cameroon covers the same product scope as the original EU WEEE directive with similar exemptions. The ordinance sets the requirements for producers to obtain a technical visa for the import of products and to finance an approved WEEE organisation. The purpose of the visa is to enable the authorities in Cameroon to regulate the import of E and identify whether E imported and declared as used E is in fact WEEE. As stated under Article 4 of the Order, producers must submit a stamped application, a pro forma import bill of equipment or materials, a certificate of registration in the Trade Register, and a receipt of payment to the National Fund for the Environment and Sustainable Development to the authorities in Cameroon in order to obtain a technical visa. The national environmental regulations for electrical and electronic sector in Nigeria are not extended producer responsibility regulations as such, as there is no take-back obligation placed on producers and importers of E. However, all importers of new and used E are required to register and report import volumes. The reporting follows the categories as per the EU WEEE directive. This is to help authorities identify imports described as used E that are actually WEEE. In Asia Pacific, we will look at the Product Stewardship Televisions and Computers Regulation under the Product Stewardship Act in Australia, the free e-waste regulations in Japan, and the new e-waste rules in India which came into effect on the 1st of October this year. The Product Stewardship Televisions and Computers Regulation, which came into force in 2011, uses a co-regulatory model for TVs and computer products. This approach requires approved industry schemes to reach certain targets. Televisions and computers, printers and computer products such as keyboards, mice, scanners and printers are all in scope of this regulation. However, computers manufactured in Australia fall out of scope, and there is no differentiation between B2C and B2B products. Organisations will only be considered liable under the regulations if they import products covered by the product import tariff codes listed in this regulation and above volumes of certain thresholds per financial year. These threshold volumes are 5,000 units for televisions, 5,000 units for computers and printers, and 15,000 units for computer products. Liable producers and importers must join and finance an approved system, otherwise called a co-regulatory arrangement. There are currently 4 organisations offering co-regulatory arrangements in Australia. In Japan, there are 3 regulations that apply to the electronic sector. The Law for Promotion of Effective Utilisation of Resources, or ALPER, the Home Appliance Recycling Law, or LRHA, and the Act on Promotion of Recycling of Small Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment, which I will refer to as the Small WEEE Act. ALPER provides a mechanism required for promoting the reduction of the generation of used goods and byproducts and the utilisation of recyclable resources and reusable parts. In other words, the 3R measures. 69 product categories have been designated with specific actions stipulated under the law. ALPER imposes eco-design measures on E, and specified resources recycled products such as computers, monitors and portable batteries are subject to voluntary end-of-life take-back measures. Producers placing less than 10,000 computers or 2,000 portable batteries on the Japanese market are exempt from obligations under this law. LRHA was introduced in April 2001. Under this law, producers must set up take-back points where retailers can drop off collected waste household appliances. Producers should also publish costs for recycling the household appliances. The law covers 5 product types: air conditioning units, TV receiving sets, refrigerators, washing machines, and clothing dryers. Under the Small WEEE Act, there are no mandatory requirements placed on producers, such as take-back, registration or financing obligations. Instead, the Act encourages manufacturers to encourage liable parties to promote the collection and appropriate treatment of end-of-life small home appliances. The new e-waste rules in India came into effect on the 1st of October this year. The rules cover IT and telecommunication equipment, consumer electricals and electronics, and fluorescent and other mercury-containing lamps. Producers must apply for extended producer responsibility authorization by the 31st of December 2016. This authorization will be valid for a period of 5 years. Micro-enterprises, as defined in the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Act 2006, are exempt from the rules. As I will explain later in this presentation, the EPR plan requires an estimate of the quantity of e-waste generated from end-of-life products, an outline of a scheme for collection and channelization of end-of-life products, an estimated budget for implementation of EPR, an outline of how the producer will generate awareness, and a declaration of RoHS compliance. The e-waste collection target during the first 2 years of implementation of the rules is 30% of waste generated. This rises to 40% during the 3rd and 4th years, 50% in the 5th and 6th years, and 70% during the 7th year onwards. In Latin America, we will look at the law establishing the framework for waste management, EPR, and promoting recycling in Chile, and the Environmental Framework Law and Implementing Regulation in Brazil. The Environmental Framework Law in Brazil introduces the principle of extended producer responsibility in the form of reverse logistics, which requires producers to collect and manage end-of-life products, including electronic products and their components. On the 13th of February 2013, a Ministry of Environment notice required producers to submit reverse logistics plans for approval before the 13th of June 2013. Currently, the Brazilian Environmental Framework Law focuses on B2C obligations with regards to reverse logistics. However, in the future, the government will start to implement B2B obligations as provided for by the law. The law in Chile, which came into force in April 2016, introduces an EPR framework for batteries and packaging, among other priority products. Article 29 of the law states that producers must achieve collection targets through individual or authorized collective compliance systems. An implementing legislation is expected to be issued within 12 months of publication of the law, by April 2017. The next couple of slides will show a comparison of the product scope and registration requirements of the legislation of the 7 countries we have just looked at. These are just 2 areas for consideration. Others include collection, recycling and reporting requirements, marking requirements, and substance restrictions. As we have just discussed, some countries such as Cameroon, Nigeria and Chile have based the product scope of the regulations on the original EU WEEE directive product scope, while others such as Australia, LRHA in Japan, India and Brazil currently have a more limited list of products. And some legislation such as LPER and the Small WEEE Act in Japan have large lists of product categories, which in the case of LPER have been designated with specific actions. Each country has differing producer registration requirements. Most countries such as Cameroon, Nigeria, Japan and Brazil require a producer to register and report volumes of E placed on the market. However, in the case of Australia, the Act requires that all liable parties covered by the regulations must join an approved co-regulatory arrangement. In India, producers must produce an extended producer responsibility plan when registering. Other e-waste legislation, such as LPER and the Small WEEE Act in Japan, does not require producers to register. Registration requirements have yet to be determined for Chile, as the implementing regulation has not yet been published. As we have demonstrated in the 7 selected countries, there are many differences between e-waste legislation in different countries. Companies usually lack the internal resources to understand and manage different compliance requirements for WEEE, batteries and packaging in each country where products are sold. Not only that, WEEE batteries and packaging regulations in each country continue to change as new requirements are implemented. The number of global regulations relating to product compliance are increasing annually. ThinkStep Compliance takes the following approach to managing your WEEE batteries and packaging recycling obligations across the world. Firstly, we determine whether there are WEEE batteries and/or packaging legislation in place in each country in question. If this is the case, we assess whether your products, including any batteries placed on the market and packaging, are covered by the scope of these regulations. If your products, batteries or packaging fall in scope of the regulations, we will determine your obligations in each country and identify the options available to comply with producer compliance requirements. ThinkStep will calculate your compliance obligation and join your company to a compliance scheme in countries where required and this is available. As part of our services, we will manage your reporting to local schemes in each country as required by the regulations in those countries. Global reporting for WEEE batteries and packaging can be made through our confidential EC4P web application. EC4P prioritizes all upcoming reporting deadlines, chases users for sales data in each country, checks data is entered in the correct format, and issues annual WEEE batteries and packaging compliance certificates. If there is no legislation in place or your products are not currently covered, or there are no compliance options available, ThinkStep will monitor the regulatory situation in each country and provide a quarterly update to ensure that you are aware of any new legislation or changes in regulations that will affect your company. This will ensure your compliance in each country. ThinkStep calculates and compares the registration and recycling fees you would pay by joining different schemes in each country, therefore recommending the most cost-effective option for compliance. As part of our fully managed service, ThinkStep pays registration and recycling fees on your behalf and invoice you at cost. We can provide a full audit of your existing compliance arrangements to determine whether you are compliant and whether you are getting the best value at the lowest cost. As we have already seen an overview of the new e-waste management rules in India, we will now focus on the registration requirements, because as previously mentioned, producers who are classed as liable parties under the rules in India must register as a WEEE producer by the 31st of December this year. Producers are required to submit Form 1, which is found in the annex of the rules, to the Central Pollution Control Board, along with an EPR plan, details of an awareness programme, a proposed budget, contracts with dealers and approved recyclers, and evidence that products are RoHS compliant. As part of the EPR plan, producers are required to estimate the quantity of e-waste generated from their end-of-life products and identify or outline a scheme for collection and recycling of end-of-life products. Based upon the advice of the many industrial agencies, the Government of India, and the Central Pollution Control Board, it is recommended that producers register and submit signed EPR plans on the 31st of December deadline. However, it is unlikely that the Central Pollution Control Board will issue the collection target requirement for producers until the 2017-2018 compliance period. Section 2.1.1 of the Guidelines for the E-Waste Management Rules define how to estimate the generation of e-waste. This is dependent on the lifespan of products, which are specified by product type in a table in the guidelines. As part of our services in India, ThinkStep will work with you to calculate the generation of e-waste estimation. This generation of e-waste estimation is then used to calculate your collection target. Schedule 3 of the rules sets out the collection targets. The e-waste collection target for the financial year 2017 to 2018 will be 30% of the estimated e-waste generation. To introduce you to ThinkStep's action plan to India, the first step is to determine whether you are obligated under the e-waste management rules. This is based on your sales arrangements, for example, considering whether you have a legal presence in this country or whether you sell via distributors. and whether your products fall into scope of the rules. We can make an anonymous approach to our contacts in the authorities of India to confirm whether specific products are in scope of the rules. This maintains your anonymity whilst we put in place your compliance arrangements. We will then look at compliance options, including different schemes in India, to determine which is the best option for you, based on your sales arrangements and quantity of products placed on the market. Where required, we will join you to a local compliance scheme and pay their membership fees on your behalf, invoicing you at cost. We assist with the registration process, working with you and the compliance scheme to generate the EPR plan, as covered in the previous slides, which is required to be submitted along with Form 1 to the Central Pollution Control Board by the approaching 31st of December 2016 deadline. Going forward, to maintain your compliance in India, we will carry out annual reporting on your behalf and provide a quarterly update which will inform you of any changes, such as collection targets, that may occur as the rules continue to be implemented. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions or you would like a member of ThinkStep to contact you regarding your global product compliance obligations, please email me at ldean@ec4p.com. You can also find more information on our services at www.ec4p.com.